Hi, everyone. So this is going to be a first for me. I'm presenting in this sort of a scenario where we're remote. So hopefully everything works out the way we anticipate. But since we're here to talk about technology, it would not be a surprise if something went a little haywire. So here we go. So we're going to talk about technology tips for working safe at home. I'm going to give you a couple of caveats at the beginning. As you all know, we're attorneys, so we have ethical obligations to look into everything that we do. We also have competency requirements. I'm not going to get into the ethics of all of those things today. I'm going to just tell you that just because I mentioned some technology, or maybe I use some technology, I would still recommend you do your homework on everything. I can tell you everything I use, I'm at least comfortable with the research I've done and with the other professionals out there that are using this technology to say that I believe I'm complying with ethics. But obviously technology changes as fast as right now everything in the world seems to change. So keeping up with it is obviously a practice on its own. We're also going to approach this from what may be a little bit of a unique way. In putting this together kind of quickly, my thought was really to talk to you about some of the tools that I use, mention some of the other things that are out there, but this is really going to give you a little bit of a spotlight into my practice, good or bad, you can decide. But that's kind of where we're going to go here. So we're also going to cover a lot of stuff. Some of this may be stuff that you know about, and some of this may be stuff you don't. It's not my intent to kind of shortcut anything, but we just want to get a lot of ideas out there for you to work with, and feel free to contact me at any point after with questions, etc. So from there, I'll also give you a caveat. I don't have any interest in any of these softwares or apps that I'm going to talk about today. So just because I mentioned someone that I use, I'm not getting any kickbacks or anything like that. It would be a great stream of revenue, but it doesn't happen. So not what's happening. All right, let's go. So let's talk about phones first. So the way I kind of set this up is, first, let's talk about communication. You're going to notice this isn't a standard PowerPoint. That's because one of the apps I'm going to talk to you about, or one of the devices that I'll talk about when we get through a little ways, is an app I use called Notability. I use it on my iPad. So today I'm actually sharing with you screens from my iPad in the Notability app. So as you can see, this is handwriting. There's a lot of ways to use this app. We'll talk about it in a bit, but I thought it was a good way to kind of share with you the technology that I use without jumping to the good old fashioned PowerPoint kind of concept. So communication, phones. I am a VoIP subscriber. So what is VoIP? For those that don't know, that's Voice over Internet Protocol, I believe is what it stands for. Bottom line, what it means is it's through the internet. So I use Freedom Voice. There are a lot of providers out there. Ring Central is another one that has a lot of functionality with it. Google Voice has essentially, is actually a VoIP, but they have a lot of different options. Google Voice declined for a while, it came back, but I use Freedom Voice. So why do I use VoIP? Well, what VoIP is if you currently have a standard phone line, your phone at the office, you probably either purchased your phone or you're maybe renting it from one of the technology companies, but basically your phone has to plug in to the outlet in your wall. And so it has to be at your office. Now you might be able to do call forwarding to get it sent to you at home right now if you're working remote, but it is what I'll call a hard line. It has to be at your office, and that's where your office phone number is. Mine doesn't work that way. So VoIP is essentially, because it's internet based, it plugs into the data port at the office and I'm up and running. So I have to plug in the power and plug it into data port, and my device is there. When I subscribe to Freedom Voice, they provide me the equipment. So I have a phone for myself and my assistant that has all the functionality. You know, I can use a headset, I can use speakerphone, I have extensions, but I have multiple lines, numbers coming in. And there's a reason for that that you'll hear about. But basically, my desktop phone, I can pick it up, pick up the cords, bring it home with me, send another one home with my assistant. We both plug them into data ports at home, whether that's in the wall or more likely at home in the back of your modem or your router. Plug those in, pick up the phone, and that is my office phone number. And so it just travels with me, and I'm right back up and running. That's one of the advantages to VoIP. Another advantage to it moving easily is that devices tend to be included. I pay roughly $55 a month for Freedom Voice, gives me 2 devices, and it gives me 3 different phone numbers. When you call in, you just call my firm number, but the way it's routed, it's actually going to different numbers internally. They also have apps. So if I use the app on my cell phone and I go to the Freedom Voice app, I can actually dial your phone number in there or a client's phone number, hit call, and on that client's end, when they look at caller ID, it is my firm phone number. It's not my cell phone. It's not any other phone number, just my firm. There are a ton of other call options inside there. It depends on the provider. I've mentioned a few in the notes here. You can port your phone number, meaning your firm phone number. If you dropped Comcast and went to VoIP, you take your phone number with you. They're going to bring it in, and that's your number. They do have automated answering. A lot of the providers now provide online fax services. There's just a ton of features. So the bonus over using a hardline phone is that it is totally portable and works in this remote environment. And it made sure that my assistant and I can work from home and be up and running, and nobody knows any different. So that's a great service. There's also, if you are not VoIP, then other things you can look at: call forwarding through your phone system, or a remote receptionist. So even though I use VoIP and I have an assistant, we still use a remote receptionist. Ruby Receptionist is who I use. And it's not because they have a department called the Happiness Department. That always kind of is a little startling to me, but that's not the reason I use them. I actually use them because it has really improved the call handling for our office, and it also allows me more flexibility in where I work. So through Freedom Voice, I have my firm number forwarded to Ruby Receptionist, and they are located primarily in Oregon, but now they have other branches, but they are all working remote even during these times. And so my phone will ring to one of their receptionists. They have kind of a transcript of how to answer that call, and they'll answer it. It'll sound just like somebody working in my office. Most of my clients think I have a ton of staff because they may be talking to a female voice one day, a male voice another day, and they're all super friendly. So they'll answer, say Martin office, so forth, so on. And then if it's a call for me, they can transfer it directly to my office number. If it's a call for my assistant, they can go directly to her. But if on the app that they have, if I have gone in and said, you know what, today I'm going to be on my cell phone only. Maybe I'm away from my desk. I'm sitting on the beach somewhere, which I can't imagine that in today's world, but it sounds good. So if I was, I could say, send all calls to my cell phone, and Ruby would just immediately ring my cell phone rather than my desk phone. Now, they don't just patch the call through and leave you hanging to pick it up and go, oh, who's this? They actually are on the line and say, hey, Jodi, I've got, Sally Smith on the phone for you. She's calling about such and such. Do you want to visit with her? And then they can patch her through, or I can send them to voicemail. Voicemails are then emailed to me so that I can see the voicemails. Another attorney I know, actually, they receive some sort of recording of all of their calls. I have not set up that feature. In some reasons, I just haven't seen the need, to be honest. But they'll also, screen your calls. Basically, they're not going to send you a marketing call unless it's somebody they know that you've said in the past, hey, I worked with them, go ahead and send them over. They can also hold your calls. If you're in court, they'll immediately say, Jodi's in court. Can we take a message or send you to voicemail or send you to her assistant? So there's a lot of options by using them. And they are up and running every day of the week during longer hours than my business hours, in part because they open super early, and because of their location, they're open later than we are. So another great option for you out there. Their apps are amazing, so that's why it is still in the technology realm. They also have a chat feature, which is handy. I don't use it, but they can manage your chats. And they have a ton of other features, some that I haven't even jumped into yet. One that I do like is the callback service I've mentioned in the notes here. That's where if it's a call that I just want them to call them back and say, Jodi doesn't practice criminal law, here is a number for you. they could do that if I was comfortable having them do that. I've noted on a few of these things that we're going to talk about, if they have a CBA perk, that's what CBA calls it, so that's what I called it. Basically, there is some sort of discount. I don't remember what it is, but if you're a CBA member, it does apply to a Ruby subscription. So yeah, so that's Ruby. That's one of the phone options. If you were a hard line, so you're a Comcast or whatever phone provider, and you're working at home and you're like, goodness, what am I going to do with my phones and how do I get those? I've made somebody stay in the office for it, or whatever the case may be. One option would be to switch to a Ruby receptionist kind of concept, because then they could answer those phones for you and send them to you. One thing I didn't mention in their app, if you were using a hard line, is there is a method through their app to actually call and call through the app in a way that shows your firm number. Again, I don't use that because of Freedom Voice, but it is something that's there in their functionality. Okay, so I guess one thing before I go to the next screen that I intended to kind of start with as sort of a kind of a baseline for you is I mentioned that I was going to talk a lot about the tools I use. So I am literally designed in a way. So my firm is, I'm a solo practitioner. I have a legal assistant who assists with things, and then I use Ruby Receptionist. So staff-wise, I have a legal assistant. I am designed in a way, I have a hard ground, on the ground office in Boulder, but I am designed in a way where I describe it as I'm pick up and go. Doesn't mean I could flee the country necessarily, which right now I don't know if that's a good or bad option, but I am set up in a way that when we switched to remote, we were sort of, I guess you might call it pack and play. So, you know, we could pick up certain gear and go and work remote if we wanted. Obviously, we still have the ability as attorneys to pop back in the office or work in the office. I do pop in and get mail and do different things, but I have sent my assistant to work remote, and I am working remote the majority of the time. So when we did that, I sent my assistant home with her laptop, a desk phone, so that Freedom Voice phone, and a scanner, and then the necessary cables to get everything connected. And she was up and running, literally when she went home, she was up and running within about an hour. And I think that was just getting everything squared away. I took home with me my laptop. I have a large monitor at home. Getting to the point where I need a bigger screen, but I do have that. And then I went ahead and took my network hub home, which is, I'm a Mac-based practitioner, so everything I have is Mac-based. So my hub is what's called an Airport, which is an Apple device that is cloud storage, or is storage, but also is my router and networks all of my devices. So I have that at home as well. I also brought a printer home that is on my network in case I needed to do some printing, and then the desk phone, a scanner, and a label printer just in case I needed to do some postage. So those are the tools I brought home. Did I bring some paper files? I did. We're going to talk about some paperless stuff, and I am trying to go as reduced paper as possible, but part of my practice, it's just very difficult because I do practice in estate planning and probate areas. So yeah, I have some files here, but for the most part, I don't really handle them much because most of our stuff is online. My assistant didn't need to take any paper files home with her. So that was something I meant to tell you kind of at the beginning, but I wanted to go ahead and throw that out there. So now that we've talked about the remote receptionist, let's see where we wanted to go next. So, oh, I would mention here, I don't think I did a slide for it, but another thing would be conference calls. So I have the ability to call on my phone and do a conference call. So I could call, you know, my assistant and then conference in a client or whatever the case may be. So I can do that on my phone, but sometimes we do need a conference number that multiple people can call into. I primarily do that with a free conference call app. So I don't know if any of you have used that, but there is a site that you can go to, freeconferencecall.com, I think. And you can sign up for a conference call number, and it's a free account. They have a lot of good features. And so I do have an account with them for that purpose, and we do have occasionally a need to use that. So that is an option for you as well. I didn't really put a slide in on that. I think a lot of people maybe have used that at some point. They have begun increasing a lot of the options available through them, including, I know they have some web conferencing now, and some other options as well. I don't use those other options, but they do exist. So you might look into that if you have an account with them as we start talking about some of these other options. So the next thing is online meetings. So for those of you joining us today, some of you, it may be your first Zoom meeting. However, we've kind of been in this pandemic operation for what feels like quite a while now, but it really is just sort of a blip almost in time. But during that time, some of you may have done some Zoom meetings, whether it's happy hours that people are doing or client meetings, those sorts of things. There are a lot of providers out there for online meetings. Zoom is not the only one, and some of you may use other providers. Ring Central, Skype, or just a few, FaceTime. I mean, the list could go on and on. I'm going to talk about Zoom in part because I have found that the majority of my clients are familiar with Zoom. I have also found that the options available in Zoom have really been handy and helpful for me. The thing we're doing right now where you can see my my notes or my, it's not a PowerPoint, but we'll call it my notes, where you can see that. And I can share that aspect of my screen, but I can also share other documents on my computer or even just my desktop. Has really been helpful in client meetings. So I do quite a bit of estate planning, and sometimes we need to, you know, maybe chart out some things for a client and show that to them because they see that they figure it out better by seeing rather than hearing. So we've had a lot of ways that we can use this tool with clients. And so I'm going to talk about Zoom. Again, it's not the only one. So what I wanted to talk to you about with Zoom is some of the options that there are with Zoom and some of the settings, because there are some security concerns that if you've seen anything, excuse me, any postings about or anything you may have heard about. So I wanted to address a few of those. So with Zoom, first of all, I'm going to kind of skip to the bottom of these notes here, but as you can see, there, and you may know, there's a free subscription that you can sign up for. That's what most of your clients are going to have. Most of them are going to just do a free account if they've done anything, and that's going to work for most people. The key with a free account, though, is you can have unlimited one-to-one meetings, but if you got more than one participant, you're going to have a problem doing client meetings sometimes because you're limited to 40 minutes. And so what we do, or what we did, is signed up for the Pro subscription, and the Pro subscription is going to give you more tools. A meeting, one-to-one meetings are still unlimited. You can have meetings of like up to 100 participants, and I think it's for 24 hours or something like that. There are also some other add-ons that come with it. So as you're looking at Zoom, that's one thing to look at, is what your needs are and which plan fits you. You can always change it one way or the other. It's not, most of them are not long-term contracts. As far as the other settings, so when you go to set up a call, I've kind of hit a few of the things in here. So phone or computer audio, what I'm talking about there is, I always tell people that it's a good idea to have the option turned on that people can do audio by phone or computer. This is because you don't know what network connections are going to be like. So if your client has a spotty Wi-Fi that they're working from, their audio may start cutting in and out. If you have given them a phone option, then they can actually call in on their phone, punch in the right numbers that are in their invite, and then they can sit there with their phone and hear, basically like a speaker, hear the audio and communicate through their phone rather than depending on the Wi-Fi connection. So they may lose their video for a moment, but they can still communicate through the audio. There's also in Zoom the screen share. Obviously you're seeing that happen. You can share devices. That's what I'm using. I'm actually sharing with you my Notability app on my iPad, and we'll talk about that a bit. There's a whiteboard available. I'm still sort of getting used to that, but it is an option that people are using and are able to do a lot of work with. Virtual backgrounds is another thing that's available. So virtual backgrounds, that is the ability at the bottom of your screen in a video call where you're videoed in. There's a spot at the bottom where you can choose virtual background in the, be on the left in the video. There's an up arrow and you can click that. And when you do, when you click that, it allows you to change your background. So like right now, my background's my office, but I could pick all sorts of things. So for a cocktail hour or a happy hour meeting with a bunch of friends, you could, you know, set up some sort of a photo that you took at the beach, or, you know, there's backgrounds out there from The Office and Schitt's Creek if you're into some sitcoms, those sorts of things. So people can change their background. You know, if you're working, if you're trying to work at home and you're having to work at the dining table and you're not comfortable with some background in your client meeting, then you can use that virtual background. Your image is going to be cut out so that I would physically be showing, but the background would just be different. So that's a definite option you can use. There's a recording option in Zoom. I don't record every meeting I have. There's various reasons for that, but if it is a meeting I want to record, which there are some I do, then the way to do that, there's a record button at the bottom if you're controlling, and you would want to hit that record button. And then also you want to set up beforehand guidelines on where that's getting saved. So they have cloud storage. If you're a pro subscriber, I know you get like, I think, a gigabyte of cloud storage. I don't want it saved in their cloud storage, so my settings would send it straight to my storage system. But it is an option to record. That is required with remote notarization. I think I have some notes later on, but I'll just mention now, I'm not going to get into remote notary work right now. That's not my topic. Somebody will talk on that next week in a different CLE. If you're a notary, I'd strongly encourage you to attend that one as well, because you definitely have to jump through certain hurdles to do that. And one of them is you need to be able to record, and you can do that with Zoom. And you have to be able to save that recording, and you can do that with Zoom as well if you've set up your settings. You can mute. All of you are muted now. There's a lot of options around that. There is an app. So for clients that don't have a camera on their computer, they might have it on their phone if they have obviously a smartphone type of device. And most people anymore do. And so they can actually Zoom from their phone or from an iPad. And then there's some scheduling options that are great inside of Zoom as well. One thing you'll note at the bottom of the page, I said to send links to help with security. I'll explain what I mean by that here in just a moment. Here are some security concerns. Really, these are ways to address security concerns. There's a lot of security concerns that have come up. And I think that's kind of going to happen anytime technology is being hit with a lot of new users. And that's what we're dealing with here. But either way, Zoom has definitely had some screw ups in the past that they've corrected and they're working on. And so these are some things you can do to help with security. So use passwords, use the waiting room, don't use the personal meeting ID, disable certain options. Lock your meeting once everybody's in, and like they've done here, you want to mute participants. Why are you locking meetings and muting people? If you haven't heard, there is a thing called a Zoom bomb. That is when somebody who's not invited to your meeting decides to pop in or bomb your meeting, and then they can be very disruptive. And unfortunately, there's even some people out there that this has become like a thing for them. So if you lock your meeting and you mute your participants, you're going to have less risk of those things. Or if you can only do one of those, right? You can't lock the meeting because people are popping in still, then mute your participants so that if you get bombed, they can't come in and cause some massive disruption that interrupts the meeting. So security concerns, I did a few, again, here, we're still in Notability, so we'll talk about Notability, but these are some of the different things you can do with it. So it's a pretty cool app. So what you're seeing here is some of the security settings. So I just did some screenshots. So you'll see that on the top left, this is when so what you're looking at is when I'm going to schedule a meeting. So I have clicked in my app, schedule meeting. At the top, I would create the name. I didn't mess with naming this example, but in the, about a third of the way down, you'll see meeting ID, and I say do not use. What I'm telling you to not use is the personal meeting ID. You always want to generate a random one. And that's because your personal meeting ID is a stagnant number. That's always there. And so it is a security risk if you use the same number, because people can randomize passwords, and that's how they can bomb. It's an annoying nuisance. I get it, but it's about protecting you. Doesn't really change much for you other than you just need to make sure you've clicked on meeting ID to generate automatically. And really, once you've set some of these settings one time, they tend to stay. But anytime you go to schedule, this pop-up is going to come up this top left. Password, again, you always want to require a password. It should default to that now, but you do want to require the password. They're only going to have to push that in if they don't use the link. But again, that's a security protection for you. Audio, that's where I've got the telephone and computer clicked on this example so that people could call in if they were losing. Calendar, my calendaring feature that I primarily use is Google Calendar. You could also, obviously, some people use Outlook. But with that, by choosing your calendar, it's going to, if you give it authorization, it's going to put the entry in your calendar with the link to use. The advantage there is you can then, the day of the meeting, just click on that entry and the link, and it will open it up if you don't have your Zoom app open. But also, people that add it to their calendar have that advantage. So when Kyle sent you the reminder for this meeting, if you had added it to your calendar, you would be able to just click it. That's the idea. Then I've circled advanced options because that's the screen at the bottom right there. These top 3 choices, those are my recommendations on the advanced options, again, for security purposes. So you enable a waiting room. That prevents people from just popping into your meeting. You enable or you disable the join before host so that you can't have a bunch of people in there before you get in, because you could have that bomber, so to speak, in the room. And mute your participants on entry. That's an optional one. Sometimes you will want to click that so that as soon as they enter the room, they're muted. Other times, depending on, if it's a one-to-one meeting with a client, I probably don't want them muted as soon as they come in, but it's an option. Again, if you're worried about these Zoom bombs coming in, you might want to start with them being muted. So another option is the recording of meetings, and that's at the bottom. So these are all accessed at the time that I'm setting up the Zoom meeting. And so these are some options that you can set. Then the next slide is, this is, so you've created the meeting and you've closed it. This is if I go back to my home page, this is what it looks like. And so on the home page, the meeting I had set up shows in my entry right there under 1109, just because I set it for at that moment. So if you look, I've circled copy invitation. What I'm trying to tell you here is that if you have a calendar entry, and you can access it here or through your calendar, but if you have this here, you can copy this entry and then paste it in an email and directly email your client the link, and they'll get all the information they need, just like you received with the notice for the CLE. But you can also do an invite depending on your calendar app. Like in Google, you can do a guest invite. They just get the direct email for their calendar. So it's really optional, and it kind of depends on what you use for calendaring and the easiest process for you. But the bottom line is get them the link, because if you get them the meeting ID, then you need to make sure they have the password, because you should use passwords. That's to protect you. So, all right. Then this is some other options that you can set when you're in the actual meeting. I did not take a screenshot of the virtual background. I hadn't thought about it, and then so it's not in here, but this is the same area. So when you're running a meeting, at the bottom of your meeting, there's at the bottom of your video screen, there's some options, and one of them is this security icon. That security icon is actually rather new, but it gives you a lot of the options that we've talked about. So one of them, if I'm in the meeting, everybody's in there, then I would click the security icon, and I can, again, this is as the host, I can then choose to lock the meeting if everybody's in. And so this is where that option is during a meeting. I can also enable the waiting room from in the meeting. So if I start my meeting and go, oh, I don't know that I did that, I could click security if I'm in there 5 minutes early or something and enable that waiting room so they go there first. I even have clients start in a waiting room because I just want to be able to control the environment. And then you can also make decisions on allowing participants to do different things. So do they get to share their screen? Do they get to chat? Do they get to rename themselves? It really depends on the nature of your meeting, but you as the host can control those things. And it's important that you look at those as you're getting ready for a meeting, because you just never know what limits you want to put. And then also, if you scoot further to the right down that screen, you'll see where I circled the up arrow. That's advanced options on screen sharing. I tend to recommend that for most meetings, you probably just want one participant to share at a time, but it depends on what you're doing. You may have a real sort of conference meeting with folks you work with, and you want everybody to be able to share certain things at the same time to look at. So it really depends on the meeting, but this is where you would change that. And also there are advanced sharing options here. That's the bottom screenshot that you see. One of them is who can share, and mine says only the host. Most meetings, that's how I have it set up. But it depends on the client, right? We may be in a meeting where the client needs to show me some major document quickly, and I want them to just hold it up to the camera. And if that's or even not hold it up to the camera, sorry, but I want them not to hold it up to the camera. I want them to share it with me because it's on their computer. If they're savvy enough to do that and it's the right situation, then I can immediately go into my advanced options in the meeting and click that over so they could share it with me and we could be good to go. So it just depends, but these are where your settings are. I am, like I said, spending just a few extra minutes here in Zoom just because of the nature of it. And the frequency. Bottom of participants panel, this is your videos on the right. In most meetings that you're controlling, you can make these adjustments if you go down to the bottom and look. Sometimes you do want to mute them on entry. So this is where you can also, in the middle of a meeting, lock it. It is available in multiple areas for this reason, because of security. All right, so we're gonna leave Zoom. All right, outside of Zoom, the next thing that I have on here are chat options. So, my assistant, when we're in the office, tends to be, that she pops in on different things, a quick, I got an intake call I want to talk to you about, or I have this, I have a question about, those sort of quick pop in the door things. Sometimes it's not okay because I'm in the midst of doing something that I need a moment. Other times, it just depends on what's going on. One way that we can keep those out of our email box while we're working from home is to use chat services. This could be texting. I have, like I said, I'm Mac-based, so I have some texting available on my computer through SMS messaging or through Messenger, but if they're not on an iPhone, Messenger isn't going to work. And so what are your other options? Depending on case management that you use, different things like that, you might have other options available. One I'm going to mention today is Slack. Some of you may have heard of it, some have not. Slack is one of those things that is actually grown in popularity before the pandemic and is gotten even much more so now that everybody is experiencing some remote work. And so Slack is essentially, it's a messaging app. You can put an app on your phone or your iPad. You can also access it online. And the online version, or really any of them, they allow you to do quick messages back and forth, similar to what you do in a conversation or in text messaging. But when I'm working, I don't always have my cell phone right there for text messaging because I tend to have that be a little more of a social thing than a work-related thing. So by using Slack, I can create projects. Their projects are titled hashtag whatever. So like hashtag general notes or hashtag Doe Estate. And so if there was a list of projects that needed to be done, say in that Doe Estate, I could, send a message in Slack to my assistant and say, hey, do these 5 things. She could then message me back and say, letter's ready for review or it's done or whatever. That's not eating up my email box because email can get a little overwhelming in my opinion with the numbers that we get. So by shifting these sort of messages into Slack, it gives me a little more control and allows for those quick conversations that might occur easier in an office environment. Slack has a free base plan, which is probably sufficient for most things that you're doing, but you can also upgrade to some of the paid plans. I'm still using the free program or the free subscription. Haven't seen the need to increase that yet. There are a lot of tools in Slack, most of which I've not even started venturing into, just haven't really had a chance. Didn't use it much before remote office really kicked into high gear. So I would suggest if you're kind of struggling to keep those communications with staff out of your email box, then set up a Slack account. You can set up the participants. So when I created my Slack account, I said, this is who I primarily communicate with for this email address. They get an email to set up. I can then create projects and then we can go from there. And you have a lot of different controls over it if you have lots of people, that sort of thing. So that's Slack. All right, so that gets us out of communication. And let's talk about paperwork. So we've all heard about being the paperless office. I am a firm believer in reducing paper. I believe that it is very difficult for attorneys to become paper free. So I just believe in reducing as much as we can by using different options. And I think as we work remote, we're kind of forced into that even more. Online payments is where I start because we still need to get paid, and I still have to go pick up the mail at the office and still get those checks in the mail, and then we have to deal with the bank and that sort of thing. So what else can we do? If you're not using online payments, I would suggest you look at it. You may already have some of this set up. Lots of banks offer it. There's options through your case management company. Rocket Matter is who does my case management. And I'll talk about them in a bit, but they do have their own payment system as well. I mean, it's through a bank, but they have one that they use. And then there's LawPay, which is a CBA perk. I've listed LawPay and given more details because that's what I'm familiar with. I have had LawPay for quite some time. I think it is a little more costly than like the Square app and some of those, but it offers advantages to attorneys that I wasn't able to find at the time anywhere else. I think there's a few other providers that have them now, but I can share a payment link with a client, so I can attach it to an email. I can there's a link on my website they can use. I can send it I can send invoices straight from LawPay if I want. I can send payment requests straight from LawPay. I can also take phone payments. So if a few clients will say, I don't want to do it online. I can't deal with that. And so they'll call the office, give us the information. We plug it straight into the app. They get an immediate receipt from the app. So we can do that. We don't keep their card numbers in our office. They can pay by credit or debit card, and LawPay has added e-check. So where you put in your banking information and it's the same as a check. So it goes through your checking account as a digital check. They use a flat fee for e-checks. With LawPay, it's $2 per e-check. I try to encourage clients to use that over credit cards because if they're getting a lot of points, I'm probably paying a little higher fee, but at the end of the day, it speeds up operations. LawPay also offers so that you can set it up to where you have 2 accounts. And so all those links you're sharing, you actually have 2 different ones you can use. One goes straight to my trust account, and one goes straight to my operating account. At all time, the fees come out of operating. So I never have to shift money around because they took fees out of my trust and I need to get it back over there. So I can send a new client the trust link so they can pay a retainer. But I can also send a client who has a past due invoice an operating link so they could just pay it straight to the operating account to pay their invoice. So there's a lot of flexibility built in. As I mentioned, it is a CBA perk. A lot of the other options out there do have some similar functionality. This is just the one that I'm most familiar with, so I can give you a little more detail on it. Also, while working remote, if you haven't started using your bank's mobile app, I would encourage that. I do electronic deposits into my operating account. My bank does not allow electronic deposits into my Coltap account. I can't really tell you the reason why, but I haven't pushed on it either. But they do allow it into my operating. So most of my deposits tend to be done without ever going to the bank, because I can do remote deposit into my operating account. It's there the next day. And most clients are paying retainers online. So it's pretty random that I end up going to the bank anymore. And so this is a way to continue to work remote. I'm going to kind of move through some of these pretty quick because we are pushing time and I want to give you time for questions. File management, document management. I've got Google Drive, OneDrive, Box, Sync.com. So there's two different things with file management. So there is, for the way I'm set up. So there is where my files are stored, which I consider to be document management more than anything, or file management. And then there is my case management where I have clients set up. So for document management, file management, I'm using Google Drive because I subscribe to the Google Office suites. So I have a lot of advantages or options available through that subscription, and including a lot of storage, which gives me my cloud storage, which protects my files. So I use Google Drive. I have given you a screenshot. There's a bunch of stuff blacked out. You're gonna see some of my file tree. But basically, again, I'm Mac-based. So if I pull up my, my file system so that I can go to a file, this is sort of how I'm set up. So firm, and then there's firm administration and main files. There are files in here that the only person with access to it is me. So Google Drive gives me the ability to limit access. So my assistant has access to anything in the main folder and can edit it, can do things, can mess with them. And so all of those folders that you see in there are things that my assistant has access to. Firm administration is solely accessible by me, and then can be shared as needed with like my bookkeeper, that sort of thing. So the idea of using Google Drive is that it syncs those files to my desktop and to the cloud at the same time, so I have a backup. If my computer blows, I know that I can pick up any other device, log in, and get my files because they are securely stored online. If my assistant, drops her computer in the driveway, I'm not going to panic because I know that everything is saved to the system online in Google Drive. We can rebuild, we can reopen it in a heartbeat. But it's also protected by passwords and authentication that we have set up. So that's the benefit to doing that. You can restore. Assistant deletes a file, I can restore it, and you can share folders and such. I can share a folder with a client if need be, or I can share it with an expert, however I want to share certain files, and we do use that quite a bit. Here's some tips on how to finalize a letter without ever printing. If you don't do that, Word has an option. I've kind of given you some instructions on that. I'm going to skip through this pretty quick. I'm on Mac. We can use that as well. If you have questions on setting those up, email me. I'm happy to give you some tips. Case management, Clio, Rocket Matter, and others. Clio and Rocket Matter are both CBA perks. There are a ton of case management apps out there. I'm a solo, so I'm using small firm options. I use Rocket Matter. I put my contacts in. It gives me an easy conflict check system. We can both work in it remotely. We can do things. It's stored in the cloud. So again, it's completely secure and protected from me destroying a computer. I know it's still there. Case management is in there. All my billing, invoices, payments can run through document storage. I can sync calendaring, emails, all of that. And they have a great app as well. I also included a link at the bottom when you get the materials, because this is a resource where you can look at a lot of reviews on law practice management software, other than if you're wanting to look beyond Rocket Matter and Clio. Taking notes. So Rocketbook I used for a while. That's a book that you order online. You write in it, you scan it, it goes into your system. it works for some people. I kind of got wore out with it. I wasn't getting them scanned in. Writing pad is an actual piece of hardware. An iPad is another example. I've gotten rid of yellow notepads except when I'm in trial, because I use my iPad with Notability, where I can directly upload to Google Drive, email it to people. I can share it on Zoom like we're doing. It syncs to my laptop. I use an Apple Pencil to write like this in Notability, and I can even sign docs in the app. I'm going to skip the file example there, but those are essentially what that is I can upload a file and then sign it. I can get client signatures in there. I've also mentioned using other apps like DocuSign and Adobe. I use Adobe. If you have Adobe DC, which is the online suite of Adobe, you have DocuSign. And so if you do, or not DocuSign, you have Adobe Sign, and so you can request signatures. It looks like this. This is a draft example, and this is the history you get with it. So this is sort of a workflow for new files you can look at. Key tools to running these systems: you need a scanner. I am the biggest fan of the ScanSnap by Fujitsu. I've had one since 2012. It is my favorite device next to my MacBook. If you tried to take it away, I'd probably cry. That thing is a beast, and we have one that was bought in 12 and is still working, and then we have a newer one. It scans everything and it puts it straight where I need it. Scanner app. I have clients that don't have scanners, so what do? I tell them to use an app on their phone. Scannable by Evernote is my favorite. They use the phone, they hold it over the document, it scans it, they can do multiple pages, and then they click the button and it emails it straight to me, and they're scans, not photos. Photos are a pain. So love that app. Online faxing, try it if you don't. A lot of VoIP providers provide it. MetroFax is another option for that. I have not had a fax machine in I don't know how long, but this allows me to get the faxes coming in, and they come to my email. I send them from my computer, and I never touch the paper. Password keeper, I've talked about a lot of apps. What do they all require? Passwords. If you don't have a password keeper, get one. I recommend 1Password just because I like their features, but there are a ton of these out there. But you need to set something up so you can keep track of all these passwords, because they all need to be different. Software subscriptions, I recommend that you look at subscribing to things like Office 365, Adobe DC, rather than buying one license of the actual software, because the subscription means that my version is consistently updated, and it means that I am able to access it online or on my device, because you still install it on your computer, but it's kept current, and it gives you more features. So if you have something that you love, look at it and see, if you're like I use Word for everything, Office 365. If you use, I think Adobe is required anymore for what I do with different things, and so I use Adobe DC. Services, everybody switched remote, so you can obviously do depositions remotely. I used Esquire Solutions recently. You can do mediations on Zoom because you can break out into separate rooms. I use Simplifile for all my recordings, like deeds, because all of the county clerks and recorders, for the most part, are working remote, but they will still take e-recording, and so they're quicker with that than mail. So I use Simplifile. It's like $10 a document, I think. We use stamps.com for all postage. I've reduced postage to very little right now because we're telling clients we're sending mostly emails and then remote notaries. So discounts, I've included this in here. Rocket Matter has a 90 days free. Also, they are offering a Rocket Aid. If this wasn't enough for you on legal tech, check it out. 13 hours of this fun for $25. And then I have a spot in there to put a link that looks like it did not get typed in. So I will get that to Kyle as well. But there is a place I found where a guy's listed all the discounts you can get. A lot of these providers, if you go to their website, have COVID specials because they want to give you a chance to work remote as much as possible. All right. Actually, that Law Sites blog at the top there, it just didn't go in the right spot. That is the link for the discounts. So there you have it. Okay, so I can open it up for questions. Let me see. I'm going to stop the share because I think I have a little more control if I do that, actually. Okay, do we have any questions? Because I slammed through that, so I understand if I do or don't. Are there any, and questions would include if there were any areas that you, that I didn't talk about that you had questions about, like if there's a technology you've been trying or you want to try and you have some questions, pop it in there. I don't guarantee I know anything about it, but if I do, I am happy to try and answer that. So I believe the chat room is open if you do have questions. And I think Kyle is still with us too. If I'm wrong there, Kyle can help me get your questions in there.
Yeah, and I'll keep an eye on the chat box. So again, if you just unmute yourself, is just at the bottom left. Just click your little microphone to unmute yourself. And if you don't feel like having your voice or image on the recording, feel free to click the chat and make sure the chat is going to either everyone or to Jodi, and we'll get those questions answered.
Yeah, and one trick too, and I don't know if it's set up to do it on this one, but one of my favorite things on Zoom meetings, just while we're checking to see if there's any questions, is that you can hit the space bar. If you're muted in certain things, you can hit the space bar and it'll briefly unmute you. So that's great if I'm sitting in on, say, a deposition, but I'm not the one asking questions. I'll mute myself. And then if I want to interject something, I can click that space bar, talk. It just unmutes me briefly. When I let off, it's going to go back to mute, which is kind of a handy little trick if you haven't used it. But yeah, so I'm looking back through here as we, yes, question, will the slides be available after the meeting? They absolutely will. Yeah, I will get them to Kyle and they will be shared. And I'm happy to answer any questions too, because the slides are pretty abbreviated. So feel free to email me any questions after this as well. And if you're trying to use a new app or some new technology and you just want some help with some settings or something, can't guarantee I know them, but I'm always happy to talk about them. My family will tell you I talk more about technology than I should sometimes if you get me started. So yeah. Because we could have definitely gone on a lot longer today, but wanted to cover some of the highlights for you guys. So, all right. One of the things while we're finishing up here that I will mention on Notability, I didn't show you. I said something about show example. What that was about was that you can actually, in the Notability app, on an iPad especially, you can click over to Google Drive, because Google Drive is on my iPad as well. I can click over there if I'm logged in, go to a file and import it straight into Notability, then put that in front of my client. So different screen of Notability, it's a new note, put it in front of my client or in front of me. We can sign it with the Apple Pencil and then email it straight from there to whomever it needs to go, or save it straight from there to a file. So that also has been something I've been able to use, you know, like if I need a quick signature on a fee agreement or something like that. One question I get sometimes is about electronic signatures, and we do participate. There's a Uniform Electronic Signature Act. I don't remember the exact name, and that would apply to us. A question about Notability working with Office 365. I can send things to Notability from Office. Other than that, the interface, I mean, because I can, from Notability, I could email you something to Outlook, so it would work in that way. But other than that, I think what you would be doing is sending things from, like, if it was a Word document, opening it in Notability or converting it in there. So yes, there's some compatibility between them. It is not completely Mac based, but it depends what you're trying to do. I don't know if you have kind of a thought that you want to tell me in your question there in chat. I'm happy to try and get a little more specific for you. So other than, let me look here. I was trying to remember, there are On the notability, a question about do I put it both on my iPad and the Mac? And the answer is yes. So the great thing is they sync. So I have the app on my notebook, on my MacBook, and then I use it the most on my iPad. In fact, I purchased the iPad specifically to shift to taking notes there. So I'll take my notes there, and they immediately sync to my MacBook. So I can open them there, I can make other changes, I can send them out. Any changes on the MacBook would be typed in. As you can see from the slides you'll get, you can type in there, you can handwrite, you can put images, you can bring in text. There's you can put memes in there, all sorts of things. You can do audio recording in there as well in the notes. I don't do it very often, but yes. So, and then it syncs automatically to my desktop. So, and that may happen as well for a PC. I truly don't know how it syncs with a PC because I haven't used a PC since before 2012, but it may. So, yeah. All right, so I think we've got just a couple minutes left in the slides. My contact information is at the beginning and the end. I did just move offices, but email and phone are all still good. And you are welcome to call or email. Like I said, I'm always good with talking about tech. So yeah, I hope this was helpful for everybody. And good luck working remote, and stay safe at home. So Kyle, was there any other thoughts from you or anything?
No, I think, like I said, I'll just send out the slides and the CLE form here shortly.
Okay.
The video of this presentation will be up on our website by tomorrow afternoon. And I just want to thank Jodi for joining us, and all of
And
you for joining
Kyle,
us as well.
it looks like we do have one more question
Oh,
real
please
quick
go ahead.
on the Fujitsu ScanSnap, my favorite tool. The Fujitsu, I can't even say it now, is it's about the size of a shoebox. It's great. It's about the size of a shoebox, a little taller, sits on my desk. You open it up. You can scan everything from business cards to paper of all different sizes. You can stack them all up. They can be different sizes. That thing will figure it out. It scans them straight to your system into PDF. But you can also do image, and then you can tell it where to go. Everything from the cloud to Google Drive, you name it, send it there. You can email, print straight from it. And it takes the greatest scans ever. And you can do OCR, which is the word recognition. The model is ScanSnap, and the most recent one, which is what I have, is the iX 500. It's a black unit. They work with Mac and PC, and they're just the greatest little tool ever. So definitely look into them. And if you want more info on them, let me know. They are a workhorse and they last. That's the other great thing. So yeah. Okay, there were a couple questions on those. So, and thanks everyone. Stay safe.
Great. Thank you, Jodi. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you again.
Thanks, Kyle.
Bye.
Bye.